My name is ADELA binti SHURI. Now I will begin with the founder of Neo-Realism. This theory was developed by Kenneth Walsh, an American political scientist. In 1979, he introduced Neo-Realism through his book, which is Theory of International Politics. Unlike classical realism, Walsh argued that the behavior of states is mainly influenced by the structure of the international system rather than by individual leader or human nature. Okay, now we will look at the Neo-Realism actually means. Neo-Realism is a theory that explains how states behave in the international system. It's argued that the international system is anarchy, which means there is no central authority or world government to control all the countries. Because of these situations, every state must rely on its own capability to protect its security and also to ensure its survival. Okay, now let's move on to the key concept of Neo-Realism. There are several important concepts in Neo-Realism. The first is anarchy, which means there is no higher authority above states. The second is that states are the main actor in international politics. Another key idea is the self-help system, where countries depend on themselves for protection instead of relying on others. Finally, Neo-Realism highly survival, national security, and the balance of power, as these are considered the main priority of every state. For example, between United States and also China, both countries continue to strengthen their military, economy, and also technological capability to protect their national interests and increase their influence. This reflects the idea of Neo-Realism because both states prioritize their own security and also power in anarchy international system.
Assalamualaikum and good day. My name is ELISA MAISARAH binti SHA'ARY and I will explain the main argument of Neo-Realism theory. Neo-Realism explains that behavior of state is mainly influenced by the structure of the international system. There are three main arguments that support this theory. The first main argument is the anarchic international system. According to Neo-Realism, the international system has no central authority or world government that has the power to control all countries. This is what Neo-Realists mean by the term anarchy. It is important to understand that anarchy does not mean chaos or disorder. Instead, it simply means there is no higher authority above states. Because there is no world government to guarantee the safety of every country, the states cannot fully depend on other countries or international organizations for protection. Instead, they must rely on themselves to ensure their own security. This is known as the self-help system, where every state is responsible for protecting its own national interests. To survive, countries often strengthen their military, improve their economy, and build alliances with other states. A good example is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Although international organizations such as the United Nations have tried to promote peace, Ukraine has still needed to rely heavily on its own military capabilities and support from its allies to defend itself. This reflects the neo-realist idea that, in the end, states must ensure their own security. The second main argument is that state survival is the primary goal. Neo-realism argues that the most important objective of every state is to survive. This means that countries want to protect their independence, sovereignty, and national security above everything else. Because the international system is uncertain, states cannot be sure the future intention of other countries. Therefore, they constantly look for ways to strengthen themselves. This can be achieved by increasing military capabilities, developing a stronger economy, or forming alliances with other countries. Neo-realists also believe that states are rational actors, meaning they are carefully consider the costs and benefits before making decisions. Their decisions are mainly based on protecting national interests rather than emotions or personal belief. For example, North Korea has continued to develop nuclear weapons because it believes that nuclear deterrence can protect the country from external threats and help ensure the survival of its government. From a neo-realist perspective, this is seen as a rational strategy for survival. The third argument is security dilemma. Neo-realism explains that states can never truly trust intentions of other countries. Even when a country increases its military only for defensive purposes, other countries may still see it as a possible threat. As a result, those countries will also strengthen their own military to protect themselves. Although each country is trying to improve its own security, this creates a cycle of fear, competition, and mistrust. This situation is called the security dilemma because action taken to increase security and actually make the international system less secure. Instead of creating peace, it often leads to military competition and armed races. A classic example is the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union. Both countries continuously expanded their military forces and nuclear weapons because each believed the other posed a threat. Although neither side wanted a direct war, their mutual suspicion created decades of tension and competition. To summarize, Neo-Realism is built on three main agreements: the anarchic international system, state survival, and the security dilemma. These agreements form the foundation of the theory. With that, I will now hand over to the next presenter for the next parts.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Nur Anis Alisha binti ZAMRI. My student ID is 2024417328. So after discussing the main arguments of Neo-Realism, I will now provide the three elements or characteristics under this theory. So the first elements or characteristic of Neo-Realism is state-centric and unitary actors. This characteristic explains that states are considered the most important actors in international politics. According to Neo-Realists, countries are the primary decision makers in global affairs rather than individual or international organizations. Neo-Realism also views states as unitary actors, meaning that they act as a single entity with a common objective, which is to protect national interests and ensure survival. Therefore, Neo-Realists pay less attention to domestic politics, leadership personalities, or ideological differences. Instead, they believe that all states respond in similar ways to external pressure within the international system. So this is considered the key characteristic of Neo-Realism because the theory focuses on the behavior of states rather than non-state actors. Neo-Realists argues that regardless of their political system or international differences, states face similar challenges in the international system and therefore tend to act in similar ways to ensure their survival and security. For instance, the strategic rivalry between China and the United States illustrate how the Neo-Realism is state-centric. Both nations place a high priority on power, security, and national interest despite having different political systems and ideologies. Okay, moving on to the second element of Neo-Realism is distribution of power, which also known as polarity. This characteristic refers how power is distributed among major states in the international system. Neo-Realists believes that the structure of international politics is shaped by the distribution of power among countries. There are three main types of polarity. Firstly, unipolar system, where one state holds most of the power. Second is bipolar system, where power is concentrated in two dominant states. Third is multipolar system, where power is shared among several major powers. According to Neo-Realism, changes in the distribution of power can influence international stability, cooperation, and conflict. As the balance of power changes, states adjust their behavior to protect their interests and security. This characteristic is important because Neo-Realists believe that the structure of the international system depends on how power is distributed among states. Different distribution of power can create different patterns of cooperation, competition, conflict, which influence the behavior of states and the overall stability of the international system. For example, the Cold War was characterized by a bipolar system dominated by the United States and the Soviet Union. The rivalry between two superpowers shaped global politics for decades. So lastly, the third element or characteristic of Neo-Realism is balance of power. Neo-Realism emphasizes the importance of maintaining a balance of power in the international system. This means that the states try to prevent any one country from becoming overwhelmingly powerful. When a state gains too much power, other states often respond by strengthening their military capabilities or they forming alliance with other countries. This balancing behavior helps the states to protect their security, independence, and national interests. Neo-Realism explains that states can achieve this balance in two ways. The first is internal balancing, where states increase their own military, economic, or technological capabilities to strengthen their position, and the second is external balancing, where states form alliance or partnership with other countries to counter a stronger rival. According to Neo-Realists, maintaining a balance of power reduces the risk of domination by a single state and contributes to greater stability in the international system. For instance, during the Cold War, many European countries joined NATO to balance the influence and military power of the Soviet Union. This demonstrates how states cooperate to maintain a balance of power and protect their security. So that's all for elements and characteristics of Neo-Realism. Now I will pass the floor to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Ilyana binti ZABIDI. My matric number is 20244039926. Now I would like to explain the impacts of Neo-Realism on international relations. Based on Neo-Realist theory, there are three major impacts that can be observed in today's international system. First impact is increased competition among states. According to Neo-Realism, the international system is anarchic, meaning there is no world government to guarantee the security of every country. Therefore, states must rely on self-help system to ensure their survival and protect their national interests. As a result, countries continuously compete in political, economic, technological, and military aspects because they cannot fully trust the intentions of other states. Neo-Realism also views states as rational actors, meaning they constantly assess threats and opportunities to strengthen their position in the international system. According to Muller, 2024, this competition is created by the structure of the international system itself, where the unequal distribution of power encourage states to seek strategic advantages and avoid falling behind other countries. For example, the rivalry between the United States and China in trade, technology, military development, and influence in the Indo-Pacific clearly demonstrate this competition. The second impact is great power rivalry and changes in the international system. Neo-Realism explains that global stability depends on the distribution of power or polarity among states. When a rising power challenges an existing dominant power, competition becomes more intense as both sides try to protect their influence and security. According to WOMAC 2024, states adopt balancing strategies to prevent any one country from becoming too dominant. This reflects the Neo-Realist view that changes in the balance of power significantly influence international politics. For example, China's rapid economic and military rise has challenged the long-standing dominance of the United States and contribute to changes in global leadership and geopolitical influence. Last impact is the formation of alliance and increasing security competition. Neo-Realism introduced the concept of the security dilemma, where one state's effort to improve its security are often viewed as a threat by other states. As a result, countries respond by strengthening their military capabilities or forming alliances to protect themselves and maintain a balance of power. For example, alliances such as UK-US and NATO were formed to strengthen defense cooperation, respond to security threats, and maintain regional stability through the balance of power.
Assalamualaikum, my name is RAUDHATUL binti SHAHIR. Now I will explain the lesson learned from Neo-Realism. So first, is state must be self-reliant. Why state must be self-reliant in anarchic system? This is because there is no central authority in the international system. So countries cannot fully depend on others for protections. Instead, they must rely on themselves and strengthen their own military and economy and technology. For example, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukraine cannot fully rely on international organizations like the United Nations to protect its territory. This is because this organization do not have strong power to stop wars immediately. Even though Ukraine receives help such as weapon, funding, and support from other countries, it still depends on its own military forces to defend its border. Ukraine soldiers are the ones directly protecting the country. This clearly shows that in an anarchic system, a state must rely on their own strength because external help is limited and not always guaranteed. So Ukraine still needs to protect itself even with international support. So for the second one is power and balance of power are very important for survival. In neo-realism, countries increase their power to avoid threats, and at the same time they try to balance power so that no country becomes too dominant. For example, during the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union were the two most powerful countries. Both were afraid that the other might become stronger. Because of this, they increased their military strength, especially nuclear weapons. They also formed alliance where the United States formed NATO and the Soviet Union formed a Warsaw Pact. The main goal was to balance each other's power so that no single country could dominate the system. This situation is known as a bipolar system. This shows that they build power not to attack, but to prevent the other side from becoming stronger. The last lesson learned from neo-realism is mistrust leads to competition and alliance. In neo-realism, countries cannot fully trust each other, so they always feel uncertain about others' intentions. For example, today countries from alliance like NATO and AUKUS to protect themselves from potential threat. This alliance allows countries to share military resources, intelligence, and defense strategies. However, countries like China and Russia may see this alliance as a threat to their own security. Even if the alliance is meant for defense, it creates fear and suspicion. As a result, this country may also increase their military strength or form their own alliance. This creates competitions and tension between states, even if no one actually wants war. So, one country defense can make another country feel unsafe. Now, I will proceed to the advantages of neo-realism. So, the first advantage of neo-realism is provide a realistic view. It explains that competition and conflict are normal because the world is anarchic and state focused on survival. For example, the rivalry between the United States and China show how countries compete in technology, economy, and military power. Both countries try to become stronger and reduce dependence on each other. This proves that competition between states is real and still happening today. Now I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum, my name is ALIESHA binti ZAMRI. So now I will discuss the second advantage of neo-realism, which is that it promotes international stability. According to neo-realism, states seek to prevent any single country from becoming overwhelmingly powerful. To achieve this, states often strengthen their own military, economic, and political capabilities or form alliance with other countries. This action helps create a balance of power within the international system. When power is distributed more evenly among major states, the risk of domination by one country is reduced, which contributes to the greater stability and security. Neo-Realist argues that this balancing behavior encourages states to act cautiously and consider their reaction of other countries before taking major actions. For example, the United States and its allies cooperate in the Indo-Pacific region to balance China's growing influence. This cooperation aims to maintain regional stability and prevent any single state from becoming dominant in the region. Therefore, neo-realists help us understand how the balance of power can contribute to stability in the international system, in the international relations. So that's all for the advantages of neo-realism in international relations. Now I'll pass the floor to the next presenter.
Okay, now I will explain the first disadvantages of neo-realism. The first disadvantages of neo-realism is that it focuses too much on conflict and also competitions among states. The theory assumes that countries are always competing for power and security because the international system is anarchic. As a result, neo-realism tends to underestimate the possibility of cooperation between states. However, in reality, countries often work together through diplomacy, trade, and also international organizations. For example, many states cooperate under the Paris Climate Agreements to address climate change, even though there is no central world government. This shows that cooperations can still occur despite the anarchy nature of the international system. Therefore, while neo-realism is useful in explaining competitions and also power politics, it does not fully explain all aspects of international relations, especially when states choose to cooperate for shared global interests.
Another criticism of neo-realism is that it focuses too much on power and the international system. The theory assumes that state behavior is mainly influenced by the distribution of power and the need for survival. However, critics argue that this explanation is too narrow because it pays less attention to international organization and what happens inside a country. For example, Neo-Realism does not fully consider how organizations such as the United Nations help promote peace, provide humanitarian assistance, and encourage cooperation between states. It also overlooks domestic factors such as political leadership, government policies, public opinion, and economic conditions, which can influence a country's foreign policy decisions. Because of this, Neo-Realism cannot fully explain every action taken by states. Sometimes, countries make decisions based not only on security and power, but also on internal political and economic reasons. For example, the United Nations has carried out many peacekeeping missions around the world to reduce conflict and support humanitarian efforts. This shows that international institutions can play an important role in influencing international relations, even though Neo-Realism gives them less importance. That's all for disadvantage of Neo-Realism. I will now pass to the next presenter.
Hi, back to me again. For the conclusion, Neo-Realism explained that because of the international system is anarchic, states must prioritize their survival, power, and security. This theory helps us understand why states compete from alliance and why great power rivalry exists. However, Neo-Realism focuses mainly on conflict and competition, so it pays less attention to international institutions and domestic factors. So overall, it remains an important theory for understanding international relations. So that's all from us. Thank you for listening.